They promised a refund if the Apache woman failed, until he rescued her. Her grandmother often told her tales of the ancestors who had faced impossible odds and had never given up. Those stories filled Leela with a deep sense of pride and a belief that determination could overcome almost anything. But she had never imagined that her own courage would soon be tested in a way that would challenge everything she believed about herself. From a young age, Leela had loved challenges. She enjoyed climbing trees faster than the boys in her neighborhood, running across the open plains with the wind in her hair, and solving puzzles that seemed impossible to everyone else. But life had never given her easy victories. Her community was small, resources were limited, and opportunities for recognition were rare. Still, Leela never let that discourage her. She understood that real achievement came from effort, not luck, and she had a heart determined to succeed. One morning, as the sun rose over the mountains, Leela heard about a competition that had been organized in the nearby town. It was a test of skill, endurance, and courage, and it promised a significant reward for the winner. The moment she learned about it, she felt a spark of excitement. This was not just another local contest. This was a challenge that could prove her abilities to the wider world, but there was more to it than just the reward. The event had gained attention because people were already placing bets. Some had even made a strange promise. If Lila, an Apache woman, failed, they would refund the money to those who bet against her. The words stung. It was not just skepticism. They were publicly doubting her capability because of who she was. Leela took a deep breath and felt a mix of determination and nervousness. She knew that entering the competition would be more than just a test of skill. It would be a statement. It would show the world that heritage, gender, or appearance could never define someone's strength. She thought of her grandmother's stories, the struggles of her ancestors, and the countless lessons she had learned about perseverance. Every doubt cast by others became fuel for her determination. She decided in that moment that she would enter the competition, not to prove them wrong, but to prove to herself that she could rise above any obstacle. Training began immediately. Leela woke up before dawn every day, practicing her skills in the quiet of the morning. She ran across the fields, jumping over rocks and fallen logs, her legs growing stronger with every stride. She climbed trees, tested her balance on narrow paths, and learned to move quickly and gracefully over uneven terrain. Every day, she pushed herself a little further than the day before, never settling for comfort or ease. But training was not only physical. Leela knew that the competition would test her mind as well as her body. She practiced concentration and patience, learning to stay calm under pressure, to think quickly in dangerous situations, and to make decisions with clarity and precision. Despite her focus, doubts sometimes crept in. She would watch the other competitors preparing, their confident movements and practiced routines making her question herself. Can I really do this? She wondered on more than one occasion. But every time fear tried to take hold, she reminded herself of the stories she had grown up with, the tales of people who faced impossible odds and never gave up. She remembered that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. With every breath, every step, and every challenge she practiced, Leela's confidence grew. The day before the competition, Leela's preparation was almost complete. She had tested every skill she could, studied the course carefully, and imagined herself completing it successfully. But she also knew that no matter how much she trained, the real test would be when she faced the unknown. That night, she lay awake in her small room, listening to the wind rustle through the trees outside, thinking about what lay ahead. She thought about her family, her community, and the people who believed in her. She thought about the skeptics who had promised refunds if she failed. Their doubt could have discouraged her, but instead, it strengthened her resolve. When the morning of the competition arrived, the town was buzzing with anticipation. People from nearby communities had gathered to watch the event, curious to see whether the young Apache woman could succeed. Leela walked toward the starting line with steady steps, her heart pounding but her mind clear. She had prepared for this moment, not just in body but in spirit. She took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face and the cool wind at her back. Every muscle, every thought, every ounce of determination she had carried with her now. The competition began with challenges that tested speed, agility, and focus. Leela moved with precision, carefully navigating obstacles that seemed impossible to some of the other participants. She slipped past barriers that had tripped others, leapt over hazards with ease, and remained calm even when the crowd's murmurs and whispers of doubt tried to unsettle her. She could feel the eyes of spectators on her, some encouraging, others skeptical, yet she focused only on the path ahead. Every step was a statement of her determination, every action a proof of her skill. But the challenges were not easy. At one point, she faced a particularly difficult obstacle, a narrow, uneven bridge suspended over a shallow but jagged stream. The crowd held its breath as she stepped onto it. One wrong move could cost her the competition. She paused, measured her steps, and moved deliberately, one foot in front of the other. Her heart raced, but her mind stayed calm. With a final, careful step, she crossed safely, earning a mixture of astonished gasps and applause from the onlookers. It was a small victory, but it gave her the confidence to continue. As the morning turned to afternoon, Leela encountered more obstacles, some physical, some mental. She faced tests of endurance that left her muscles burning and her lungs aching. She was pushed to the edge of her abilities, yet she refused to give up. Each challenge she overcame strengthened her resolve, proving to herself that determination and focus could carry her through even the toughest trials. The skeptics who had promised refunds began to quiet down, replaced by murmurs of surprise at her skill and perseverance. By the end of the day, Leela had completed the majority of the competition, her body exhausted but her spirit stronger than ever. She realized that the competition was more than a contest. It was a journey of self-discovery. She had faced doubt, fear, and immense pressure, yet she had continued moving forward. She had shown that courage, preparation, and determination could overcome almost any obstacle. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the town, Leela stood at the edge of the final stage. She looked back at the path she had traveled, the challenges she had overcome, the doubts she had faced, and the strength she had discovered within herself. Though she knew the next obstacle would be the hardest, she also knew that she had prepared as well as she could. Whatever happened next, she would face it with courage, skill, and determination, just as her ancestors had taught her. That evening, Leela felt a quiet pride in herself. She had come far, not just in the competition, but in understanding her own strength. The journey had tested her in ways she could not have imagined, and she had emerged stronger, braver, and more determined than ever. The story of the Apache woman who refused to be doubted was just beginning, and the challenges ahead, though still unknown, no longer seemed insurmountable. The morning of the next stage arrived with a soft golden light spilling over the hills. Leela woke with a sense of quiet determination, her body still sore from the previous day but her spirit stronger than ever. She remembered how she had crossed the narrow bridge and faced each obstacle with courage. Now, the challenges ahead were even harder. This stage would test not only her physical abilities but also her mind and patience. She knew that every step would count, and any misstep could cost her the competition. As she walked toward the starting area, the crowd had grown larger. People from neighboring towns had come to watch, curious to see how far the young Apache woman could go. Whispers and murmurs followed her path. Some doubted her abilities still, thinking that a woman from a small community could not compete with the more experienced participants. Others, however, began to admire her courage and resilience. Leela felt the eyes on her, some heavy with expectation, others with disbelief. But she focused only on herself, taking deep breaths and centering her mind for the challenges ahead. The first obstacle of the day was a complex course of climbing walls and swinging ropes. Each participant had to reach the top and cross a series of suspended platforms without falling. Leela studied the course carefully, noting the placement of each rope and platform. Her experience climbing trees and jumping across rocks gave her an advantage, but the pressure of the competition made the task far more challenging than she had imagined. With steady hands and careful movements, she began her climb. Her muscles ached and her heart raced, but she kept going. When she reached a particularly tricky section where the rope swung unpredictably, she paused, taking a moment to steady herself. She recalled the advice her father had once given her: do not rush. Focus on each step and trust your own strength. With that in mind, she moved slowly but confidently, landing safely on the next platform. The crowd gasped, impressed by her poise and balance. However, the difficulty increased as she advanced. The final part of the obstacle was a narrow beam suspended high above the ground. Many participants had failed here, slipping or losing balance, but Leela knew that fear would not help her. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment to calm her racing thoughts, and focused on the beam. Step by step, she moved forward, her muscles trembling but her determination unwavering. As she reached the end, she felt a surge of triumph. Though exhausted, she had completed the obstacle that had challenged so many others. But as Leela moved toward the next stage, a new challenge emerged, one she had not fully anticipated. This part of the competition was not about physical strength alone. It was designed to test mental endurance and problem-solving skills under pressure. Participants had to navigate a maze filled with puzzles and riddles, all while being timed. Leela had always been good at solving problems, but the fatigue from the previous obstacles made the task far more difficult. She entered the maze, taking care to observe every detail. The walls were tall, painted in confusing patterns that made it difficult to judge distances. At first, she moved cautiously, testing pathways and trying to remember each turn. She quickly realized that rushing would only lead to mistakes. Using her memory and logical thinking, she started to map the maze in her mind, creating a strategy to reach the center where the final puzzle awaited. As she advanced, she noticed the other competitors struggling. Some were panicking, retracing their steps in frustration. Leela, however, kept calm. She reminded herself of the stories her grandmother had told her, tales of people who had faced impossible odds and remained focused in the face of danger. That wisdom guided her, giving her the patience to carefully solve each puzzle and navigate each twist and turn. Hours seemed to pass as Leela worked her way through the maze. Her hands were scraped from brushing against rough walls, and her legs ached from constant movement. She felt moments of doubt creeping in. What if she made a mistake? What if she failed after coming so far? She shook her head, refusing to let fear take hold. She took a deep breath and focused on the present moment, one step at a time, one puzzle at a time. At one point, she came to a section of the maze that seemed impossible. A large, locked gate blocked the path, and the puzzle to open it appeared incredibly complex. Other participants had already given up here, frustrated and exhausted. Leela stared at the puzzle, trying to find a pattern, a clue that would help her succeed. Time ticked by and pressure mounted. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the effort of concentration. Then, almost instinctively, she noticed a small symbol etched faintly into the gate, a clue that the designers had intended for careful observers to notice. Her heart raced as she realized she could solve it. With patience and precision, she manipulated the components of the puzzle. Each move required careful thought, and one wrong adjustment could ruin her progress. Sweat dripped from her forehead, and her fingers ached from effort, but she persisted. Slowly, methodically, she completed the puzzle. With a satisfying click, the gate swung open. Leela had done it. Relief washed over her, but she did not pause for long. There was still more to do, and she knew that she needed to maintain her focus to complete the stage successfully. It was then, as she exited the maze, that she noticed someone watching her closely. A man, unfamiliar to her, had been observing her progress from the sidelines. He did not cheer or shout, but his calm, steady gaze followed her every move. There was something in his demeanor, a quiet recognition of her skill and courage, that made her pause. For a moment, she wondered why he was paying so much attention. She had never seen him before, yet there was a sense of understanding in his eyes, as if he could see the effort and determination she had poured into each challenge. The next obstacle was one of the most physically demanding yet, a steep, rocky incline that required not just strength but strategy. Participants had to climb using a combination of ropes, footholds, and careful balance. Many had already failed here, slipping on loose rocks or tiring before reaching the top. Leela studied the incline carefully, noting each point where she could secure her footing and grip. She started the climb slowly, her muscles screaming with effort but her mind clear and focused. Halfway up the incline, she stumbled slightly on a loose rock. The moment froze her for a second, and her heart pounded. She knew that losing focus here could mean disaster. But she took a deep breath, steadied herself, and continued. Every movement was deliberate, every step calculated. Slowly, she made her way to the top, her body trembling with exhaustion but her spirit triumphant. She had overcome the challenge that had defeated so many before her. It was during this climb that the man she had noticed earlier stepped closer. He did not interfere, but his presence seemed to give her a sense of reassurance. She realized that sometimes, support did not always need words or action. It could be the silent acknowledgement that someone else recognized the effort you were putting in, the courage it took to keep moving forward when every muscle and bone screamed to stop. Finally, after hours of continuous effort, Leela reached the end of the stage. She stood at the top of a small hill, overlooking the course she had conquered. Her body ached, her muscles burned, and sweat covered her from head to toe. Yet in that moment, she felt a deep sense of pride and accomplishment. She had faced extreme physical challenges, solved complex mental puzzles, and endured the doubts of spectators who had not believed in her. And through it all, she had not given up. As she caught her breath, Leela reflected on the journey so far. The competition was no longer just about winning a prize or proving others wrong. It had become a personal journey, a test of patience, endurance, courage, and determination. She realized that every challenge she had faced, every obstacle she had overcome, was shaping her into a stronger, wiser person. She had learned that perseverance was not just about strength, but about focus, strategy, and believing in oneself even when others doubted you. By the time the stage ended, whispers had spread through the crowd. Some who had doubted her now watched in awe, while others were quietly impressed by her resilience. Leela did not seek their approval, but she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that her actions had spoken louder than words. She had proven to herself, more than anyone else, that courage, skill, and determination could carry a person through even the most difficult challenges. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, Leela rested briefly, preparing herself for the next stage. She knew that the journey was far from over and the final obstacles would be even more demanding. Yet she felt ready. Every trial she had faced had prepared her for what lay ahead. And somewhere in the crowd, she sensed that the quiet man who had observed her might play a role in what was coming next, though she did not yet know how. What Leela did know, however, was this. She would face whatever challenges came her way with courage, patience, and determination. No obstacle could shake her focus, no doubt could weaken her resolve. The stage of struggle had strengthened her, and she was ready for the trials that still awaited her. With that thought, she stood tall, ready to continue her journey, knowing that the real test was just beginning. The morning sun rose slowly over the competition grounds, casting long shadows across the course. Leela felt the ache in her muscles from the previous day, yet she welcomed it as a reminder of how far she had already come. Her mind was clear, and her determination had never been stronger. She knew that today would bring the most difficult challenges yet. Every participant was exhausted, but Leela understood that endurance, patience, and focus were the keys to success. As she approached the starting area, the crowd was larger than ever. Word had spread of the Apache woman who had surpassed expectations, and people from nearby towns and villages had gathered to watch. Some were curious to see if she could continue her incredible performance, while others were doubtful that she could maintain her lead. Yet Leela paid no attention to the whispers or the stares. She had learned that distraction could be dangerous, and she focused entirely on the path ahead. The first obstacle of the day was a series of towering walls, each taller than the last, connected by narrow ropes and ledges. Many competitors had already struggled with the early walls, losing confidence and energy. Leela approached them carefully, examining each rope and foothold. She remembered her training, recalling every moment she had practiced climbing, balancing, and leaping across heights. With a deep breath, she grabbed the first rope and began her ascent. The climb was grueling. Her arms burned from holding her weight, and her legs ached as she pushed upward. A sudden gust of wind made the rope sway dangerously, and she had to pause, gripping tightly to maintain her balance. Every second mattered, and the crowd watched silently, tension hanging in the air. But Leela did not falter. She focused on her movements, placing each hand and foot with care. Step by step, she climbed higher, ignoring the fear and the whispers of doubt. Halfway up the tallest wall, Leela encountered a particularly difficult section where the ropes twisted in an almost impossible pattern. Many participants had failed here, losing their grip or misjudging their footing. Leela paused, studying the ropes carefully. She remembered her father's advice: think before you act and trust your instincts. Drawing on her inner strength, she found the rhythm, timing her movements perfectly. With careful precision, she swung to the next rope and continued upward. As she reached the top of the wall, a surge of exhilaration coursed through her. The crowd erupted in applause, but Leela barely noticed. Her focus shifted immediately to the next obstacle, a series of moving platforms suspended high above a shallow canyon. The platforms tilted and shifted, testing balance, timing, and courage. Leela knew this would be one of the hardest challenges yet. She stepped carefully onto the first platform, feeling it wobble beneath her weight. Her heart pounded, but she concentrated on each movement, keeping her center of gravity steady. With patience and determination, she advanced, platform by platform. At one point, a platform tilted sharply, sending her off balance. She stumbled, her hands grasping the edges for support. For a brief moment, fear threatened to overtake her, but she remembered the stories of her ancestors and the lessons her grandmother had taught her. With a deep breath, she steadied herself and continued forward. As Leela neared the end of the platforms, she noticed a shadow moving quickly along the edge of the course. It was the man she had seen during the previous stage, Ethan. He had been observing her from a distance, silently following her progress. Today, his presence felt different. There was an unspoken sense that he might be needed soon, though Leela did not yet know how. She continued, keeping her focus, but she could sense that something was about to happen. The next challenge brought her to a narrow path suspended over jagged rocks. The path was uneven, with loose stones that threatened to slip underfoot. Leela took each step cautiously, testing the stones before putting her full weight on them. Halfway across, a stone shifted beneath her, causing her to stumble. She reached for balance, her heart racing. The path was treacherous, and she realized that one wrong move could lead to disaster. Suddenly, a stronger gust of wind swept across the path, making her footing even more unstable. She froze for a moment, her body tense and her mind racing. Then she remembered the training she had done, the hours spent preparing for moments exactly like this. She focused on a single point ahead, letting her instincts guide her. Step by step, she inched forward, steadying herself against the wind until she reached solid ground at the end of the path. As she paused to catch her breath, Ethan approached quietly from the side. "Be careful," he said softly, his voice calm but urgent. Leela looked at him, startled that he was so close. "The next part, it's dangerous. You'll need support." She nodded, sensing that his words were not just caution, they were guidance born from experience. She had been strong on her own, but now she realized that teamwork might be necessary to face what lay ahead. The following obstacle was a large, unstable structure built of logs and ropes, designed to test strength, balance, and quick thinking simultaneously. Participants had to cross it without falling, but the logs shifted unpredictably, and the ropes swayed violently with every movement. Leela stepped onto the first log, feeling it wobble beneath her weight. Her muscles burned from the climb and her focus was stretched thin, but she pressed forward, remembering every lesson she had learned about balance and precision. Halfway across the structure, a log tilted sharply, throwing her off balance. For a split second, she lost control and the structure creaked ominously. Fear flashed through her mind and she realized she could fall. But before panic could take over, Ethan reached out, steadying one end of the log. His intervention was quick, precise, and calm, giving her the support she needed to regain her balance. She felt a wave of relief, but also a surge of respect for the man who had acted so decisively without hesitation. With Ethan's help, Leela continued across the structure. Though the support was brief, it allowed her to focus on her strength and skill, rather than worrying about falling. Step by step, they navigated the treacherous logs and ropes. The crowd watched in awe, murmurs of surprise and admiration spreading through the spectators. They had expected her to struggle alone, yet now they saw a remarkable display of courage, resilience, and teamwork. Once she reached the end of the structure, Leela took a moment to steady herself. Her body ached, but her mind was sharp. She realized that the competition was no longer just about individual strength. It was about recognizing when help was needed and accepting it without fear or pride. She glanced at Ethan, who nodded silently, then stepped back to give her space. Leela understood that he had not taken credit for her success. He had simply given her the opportunity to continue when she might have faltered. The final challenge of the day was approaching, a steep cliff face that required climbing with ropes, careful footwork, and immense courage. Leela stared up at it, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. The cliff was taller than anything she had faced before, and the path to the top was narrow and unstable. Every step would demand focus, strength, and endurance. She could hear the crowd holding its breath, knowing that this would be the decisive moment of the stage. As she began the ascent, her muscles screamed in protest, but she refused to give in. She gripped the ropes tightly, placing her feet carefully on small ledges. Halfway up, a piece of rock gave way beneath her hand. Her body jolted and she felt herself slipping. Time seemed to slow. Then, instinctively, Ethan reached out again, steadying her just enough to prevent a fall. Leela's heart pounded, but she regained control, her hands finding secure grips and her feet landing safely on the next ledge. With renewed determination, she continued upward. Each movement was calculated, each breath steady. The wind whipped around her, but she focused only on the path ahead. Slowly, steadily, she climbed, her body straining but her spirit unbroken. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she reached the top of the cliff. The crowd erupted in applause, cheering for the Apache woman who had overcome the impossible. Leela stood tall, exhausted but triumphant, her chest heaving as she looked out over the course she had conquered. In that moment, she understood something profound. Success was not just about strength, skill, or determination. It was also about recognizing support when it mattered most. Ethan's timely help had not diminished her victory. It had allowed her to reach her full potential. She had learned that courage included accepting assistance, and that resilience was strengthened when combined with trust and teamwork. As she descended to the ground, Leela felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had faced fear, exhaustion, and uncertainty, yet she had emerged stronger and wiser. The stage had tested her in every possible way, and she had not faltered. The whispers of doubt had been replaced with awe and admiration. And somewhere in the crowd, she knew, Ethan had witnessed her true strength, one that combined talent, courage, and the willingness to accept help when it was needed most. The morning of the final stage arrived with a quiet intensity. The air was filled with anticipation, and the crowd seemed larger than ever. News of Leela's incredible performance had spread far and wide. People who had doubted her before were now watching with awe, their eyes fixed on the young Apache woman who had defied expectations. Leela felt the weight of their attention, but she did not let it distract her. She had faced challenges before, and she knew that today would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. The course for the final stage was unlike anything she had encountered. It combined everything she had faced in the previous stages: physical obstacles, mental puzzles, and extreme endurance tests, but with even greater difficulty. The first section was a steep, rocky incline that required careful footwork and balance. Leela approached it calmly, recalling every technique she had practiced. Her legs were sore from the previous days, but she focused on each step, testing every foothold and handhold carefully. Halfway up the incline, the ground beneath her shifted slightly. A small rock loosened, sending her foot sliding. She caught herself just in time, her heart racing, and pressed on. The incline was treacherous, and the slightest misstep could mean falling and losing the competition. Leela reminded herself to stay calm, breathe deeply, and concentrate on each movement. Step by step, she climbed higher, her muscles trembling but her determination unwavering. After the incline came a section that tested strength and coordination. Participants had to lift heavy logs, balance on narrow beams, and swing across gaps using ropes. Many had failed here before, giving up after repeated attempts. Leela approached the first log, steadying herself before lifting it. The weight was immense, and her arms shook with the effort, but she refused to quit. Slowly, she moved the log into position, balancing it carefully on the beams. Each motion required precision and patience, and she focused on controlling her strength rather than rushing. Once the log was in place, Leela carefully stepped onto the narrow beam. It wobbled under her weight, testing her balance. She felt the sweat on her palms and the strain in her legs, but she did not falter. Every step was deliberate, measured, and controlled. As she reached the swinging rope section, she paused, taking a moment to steady herself. This was one of the most dangerous parts of the stage, and she knew that any mistake could be disastrous. She grabbed the first rope and swung across the gap. Her hands burned from the friction, and the rope swayed unpredictably. For a brief moment, she lost her balance and felt herself tipping forward. Time seemed to slow as she struggled to regain control. It was then that she felt a steadying hand behind her. Ethan had anticipated this moment and moved quickly to support her. His grip was firm but gentle, just enough to prevent her from falling. Leela felt a rush of relief, but she also knew that the final challenge was still ahead. The crowd watched in silence, aware that this was the decisive moment of the competition. Leela had made it through incredible obstacles, but the final task required navigating a narrow, treacherous path suspended high above the ground. The path was unstable, with gaps that demanded precise jumps and ledges that tested balance. Her body was exhausted, and her heart pounded in her chest, yet she knew she could not hesitate. Step by step, she moved forward, testing each foothold before committing her weight. The wind blew sharply, making the path sway dangerously. Leela's muscles screamed with effort, and her mind raced to calculate every move. She had come so far, and now, more than ever, she needed to trust her skills and instincts. But as she reached a particularly unstable section, the ground beneath her shifted unexpectedly. She stumbled, losing her balance. For a split second, fear gripped her. The drop was far, and falling could mean serious injury. She reached for support, but there was nothing solid nearby. The path swayed beneath her feet, and she felt herself tipping forward. Time slowed, and the crowd gasped, knowing that she was in serious danger. Then, instinctively, Ethan acted. He lunged forward, his hands gripping her tightly and steadying her just enough to prevent a fall. The moment was tense, almost unreal. Leela's heart pounded as she regained control, her fingers gripping the ledge and her feet finding solid support once more. She realized in that instant that she could not have completed this section alone. Ethan's intervention had been timely, precise, and calm. He had not rushed in recklessly, but had chosen the exact moment when she needed help most. With his support, she took a deep breath, steadied her body, and continued forward. Every step from that point felt more deliberate. She knew the danger had not passed entirely, but the near miss had sharpened her focus. Ethan stayed close, providing silent guidance and reassurance. His presence was steadying, giving her the confidence to navigate the remaining obstacles. The crowd watched in awe, murmurs of astonishment spreading through the spectators. They had never seen such courage, determination, and teamwork displayed in a single competitor. As Leela approached the final section of the course, a narrow beam stretched across a chasm. The beam was thin, slick from the morning dew, and swayed with even the slightest movement. Her body was exhausted, her muscles trembling, but she took a deep breath and focused. One step at a time, she moved forward, using every ounce of balance and strength she had left. Halfway across, a sudden gust of wind nearly knocked her off. She froze, her heart racing. Ethan was there instantly, steadying the beam from the side and giving her the support she needed to regain balance. She felt a rush of gratitude but also determination. This was her moment, and she knew she had to finish the path on her own. Step by step, she advanced, each movement deliberate and controlled. Finally, she reached the end, her body shaking from exhaustion but her spirit triumphant. The crowd erupted in cheers, applauding the Apache woman who had faced impossible odds and succeeded. Leela stood at the edge of the path, looking back at the treacherous course she had conquered. She realized that the victory was not just hers alone. It was a combination of her determination, skill, and the timely support she had received when it mattered most. Ethan stepped back, nodding silently, acknowledging her achievement without taking credit. After the applause settled, Leela took a moment to reflect. The journey had tested her in every way imaginable. She had faced physical exhaustion, mental challenges, fear, and uncertainty. Yet she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident than ever. She understood that true courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to continue moving forward despite it. And she had learned that accepting help when needed did not diminish her strength, it enhanced it. The final moments of the stage were a mix of celebration and reflection. Leela descended carefully from the platform, her legs shaky but her mind clear. Spectators surrounded her, offering congratulations and admiration. Those who had doubted her before looked on in awe, realizing that her success was earned through a combination of skill, courage, and resilience. Leela smiled quietly, knowing that the journey had been more important than the recognition. In a quiet moment, she turned to Ethan. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded, his expression calm but filled with respect. "You did this yourself," he replied. "I was just there to make sure you could finish." Leela understood the truth in his words. The support had been brief but crucial, a reminder that even the strongest people sometimes need a hand to navigate moments of extreme danger. As the day came to an end, Leela felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she had ever experienced. She had faced the most difficult challenges of her life and had emerged victorious. The competition had pushed her to her limits, revealing not only her physical strength, but also her courage, patience, and determination. She knew that the lessons she had learned would stay with her forever, guiding her in future challenges and in life itself. The story of the Apache woman who had faced impossible odds spread quickly. People marveled at her courage and determination, inspired by the way she had navigated danger with skill and composure. Her journey became more than a tale of competition. It became a story of resilience, trust, and the power of human courage when facing adversity. And at the center of it all was a quiet understanding that even the strongest among us sometimes need a helping hand, and that accepting support can be a sign of true strength. After the intense final stage, Leela stood at the center of the competition grounds, her chest heaving, and her legs trembling. The crowd had erupted in applause, cheering for her courage, determination, and skill. People from all around had gathered to witness her incredible journey, and many were still in disbelief at what she had accomplished. Those who had doubted her abilities had been silenced, and those who had cheered from the beginning were overwhelmed with admiration. But Leela barely noticed the noise around her. She was still processing everything she had experienced, the obstacles, the fear, the near misses, and the moments of triumph. Her mind wandered back to the beginning of her journey, to the day she had first heard about the competition. She remembered the whispers of doubt, the promises of refunds from skeptics who believed she would fail. Those words had once stung, but they had also fueled her determination. She had trained tirelessly, testing her strength, skill, and patience every single day. She had faced each obstacle with courage, even when her body ached and her mind questioned her abilities. And now, standing victorious, she realized that the journey had been about far more than winning. It had been about discovering her own strength. Ethan stood nearby, watching quietly as Leela received the cheers of the crowd. Though he had intervened during critical moments, he had done so with respect, allowing Leela to finish each challenge on her own. He had seen her potential and understood that sometimes a helping hand at the right moment could make all the difference. He approached her now, his expression calm but filled with pride. "You did it," he said softly. "I knew you could," Leela smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude that went beyond words. "Thank you," she replied. "I couldn't have done this without your support at that moment, but this victory, it's mine too." The organizers of the competition approached Leela, congratulating her on her incredible performance. They praised her courage, skill, and perseverance, noting that she had surpassed even their highest expectations. Leela listened politely, her heart swelling with pride but also with humility. She understood that this victory was not just about her. It was about everyone who had supported her, believed in her, and even those who had doubted her, because their doubt had challenged her to prove herself. As the day went on, the atmosphere at the competition grounds shifted from excitement to reflection. Spectators discussed Leela's journey in hushed tones, marveling at her bravery and determination. Children looked at her with wide eyes, inspired by the example she had set. Parents and elders nodded in approval, seeing in her the strength of heritage, courage, and perseverance. Leela felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that her journey had inspired others, that her efforts had shown people the power of persistence and self-belief. Later, when the competition officially ended, Leela was awarded the trophy for her victory. She held it carefully in her hands, feeling the weight not only of the object but also of everything it represented, the countless hours of preparation, the challenges overcome, and the courage it had taken to face fear and uncertainty. She thought of her ancestors, her family, and her community. Their stories, their struggles, and their wisdom had guided her through this journey, and she felt a deep connection to them in that moment. Ethan stood beside her, watching as she accepted the award. Though he had played a small role in her journey, he had done so quietly, allowing her to shine. Leela looked at him and nodded, silently acknowledging his support and bravery. She knew that while she had achieved this victory through her own skill and determination, the presence of someone who believed in her at the right moment had made a difference. It was a lesson she would carry with her forever, that courage and success often involve trust, collaboration, and recognizing the value of support. As the crowd dispersed, Leela took a moment to reflect on what she had learned. The competition had tested her in ways she could never have imagined. She had faced physical exhaustion, mental challenges, fear, and uncertainty. She had stumbled and nearly fallen, yet she had found the strength to continue. She had learned that true courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. She had also learned that accepting help when needed was not a sign of weakness, but of wisdom and resilience. Returning to her community, Leela was greeted as a hero. People celebrated her victory, but more than that, they celebrated her spirit, her determination, and the example she had set. Young girls looked up to her, inspired to pursue their own dreams and overcome their own obstacles. Elders shared her story with pride, recognizing that her journey embodied the values they had always taught: perseverance, courage, and respect for oneself and others. In the days that followed, Leela took time to reflect privately on her journey. She thought about the moments of fear, the near falls, and the challenges that had tested her limits. She remembered how she had struggled through the maze, balanced on narrow beams and climbed steep inclines. She thought about the wind that nearly knocked her off the path, and the treacherous platforms that required every ounce of focus and patience. And she remembered Ethan's timely interventions, which had reminded her that trust and teamwork were as important as personal skill and determination. Leela also reflected on the reactions of those who had doubted her. Initially, their skepticism had been painful, but she realized that it had fueled her determination. Every doubt, every whispered remark, and every promise of a refund if she failed had pushed her to train harder, focus more, and believe in herself. She understood now that challenges often come disguised as criticism or disbelief, and that the key to overcoming them is to channel that energy into preparation, perseverance, and courage. As the weeks passed, Leela continued to grow. The victory had given her recognition, but it had also given her perspective. She understood that success was not simply about winning a competition. It was about the journey, the lessons learned, and the growth that came from facing obstacles with courage and patience. She shared her experiences with others, teaching them the importance of perseverance, self-belief, and the willingness to accept support when needed. Her story became a source of inspiration, showing that true strength combines skill, courage, determination, and the wisdom to recognize when to trust others. One evening, as she sat quietly reflecting on the journey, Ethan visited her. They spoke about the competition, the challenges, and the moments that had tested them both. Leela thanked him again for his support, acknowledging the role he had played in her victory. "I didn't do much," he said humbly. "You were the one who faced every challenge, climbed every obstacle, and solved every puzzle. I was just there to make sure you could finish safely." Leela smiled, understanding the truth in his words. She had been the one to achieve the victory, but the lesson she had learned about courage, trust, and teamwork would stay with her forever. The story of the Apache woman who had faced impossible odds spread far and wide. People marveled at her bravery, perseverance, and skill. Her journey became a symbol of hope and determination, inspiring countless others to face their own challenges with courage and patience. Leela knew that her victory was more than just personal. It was a story that showed the power of human spirit, resilience, and the importance of recognizing support when needed. As time passed, Leela continued to challenge herself in new ways. She trained harder, explored new opportunities, and encouraged others to pursue their dreams with the same courage she had shown. She remembered every moment of the competition, the obstacles, the challenges, the fear, and the triumph. and she carried forward the lessons she had learned. That true strength comes from perseverance, courage, self-belief, and the willingness to accept help when it matters most. In the end, Leela's victory was celebrated not only for the achievement itself, but for the journey she had undertaken. She had faced fear, danger, and doubt, and had emerged victorious through skill, courage, and determination. She had learned that every challenge, no matter how difficult, could be overcome with preparation, focus, and belief in oneself. And she had discovered that sometimes, a timely act of support could make the difference between failure and triumph. Standing once again among her community, holding the trophy she had earned, Leela felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her journey had been long and difficult, but it had shaped her into a stronger, wiser, and more courageous person. She knew that the lessons she had learned would guide her through the rest of her life, and that her story would inspire others to pursue their dreams with determination and courage. With a quiet smile, Leela looked toward the horizon, ready to face whatever new challenges lay ahead. She had proven to herself and to the world that true courage comes from perseverance, skill, and the willingness to trust in oneself, and sometimes in others. Her journey had ended, but her story, her inspiration, and the lessons she had learned would live on forever.